Remember when Lennon wrote that article, What is to be done? Well, that's our final question tonight. What is to be done about the visa system and the transferring of labour around the world in the way that it's being transferred at the present time? It's very important that we workers in Australia don't treat foreign workers as if they don't belong here. What we should be doing is ensuring that their rights are protected, that they join trade unions and that collectivism triumphs. Well, that's what I'd have thought. I wonder what our guests think.
Well, the global picture is something that I think Australian workers don't fully appreciate how exploitative the modern workplace is. Trafficking in human beings and forced labour is a reality for people this century, today, this week. And it's a part of exploitation of Australian workers. People are actually trafficked into Australia, either through the legal system or underneath the legal system. So there are more than 15 million workers who are trafficked. That is human trafficking around the world. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's only the statistics that we can lay our hands on. So there's actually a global alliance that's been developed through the International Labour Organisation and through trade unions internationally to address that practice of forced labour at the extreme end of exploitation in countries where we see, in Burma, for example, and other countries where particularly rural workers, agricultural workers are bonded labour. So people this is an extreme version, but it's a reality for tens of millions of people and for families, not just workers and child workers, but in South Asia, for example, where a family will get into debt and literally sell a child or a worker to an employer, to a plantation owner, for example. That is the reality right now. This is not history I'm talking about. That's not the slave trade 100 or 200 years ago. This is now, and it's actually increasing. And so that's one end of the extreme of the spectrum. But in reality, the people are shifting countries, continents, for survival. So that is what we talk about when we talk about labour mobility. It's not simply moving from Tasmania to Gladstone, Queensland because there's a job there. It's actually moving countries, and sometimes without documents. That's called illegal migration in some circles, but it's actually people seeking a livelihood because they don't have one in the country where they were born. And this is massive numbers of people being displaced or crossing borders to seek work. This is the natural and international phenomenon right now.
And so if there are that amount of people who are actually seeking out of dire need, the ability to exploit them and to use them merely as economic units, as a chess piece or as a computer part, becomes very viable.
I think one of the problems that we have in Australia with the 457 visa holders is the absolute lack of rights that the 457 visa holders have. So they become beholden to the person who's employing them. That employer, if they withdraw support for the 457 visa holder, leaves the 457 visa holder in a position where they get deported. So it makes the 457 visa holders extremely vulnerable within Australia. Not as vulnerable as workers who are being trafficked, as Alison pointed out, and those people are very much at the worst treated in the global migration. But within Australia, and the things that we can fix here in Australia, the exploitation of temporary visa holders, temporary workers, is something we can do something about. What we need to understand in Australia is that the solution to our skills shortage problem, the solution to a skilled labour shortage problem is permanent migration, is to actually offer workers the chance, if they want to come to Australia to work, to come here permanently. If we can't get anyone to come permanently, then we need to start looking at other options. But that has to be our port of call after we've exhausted all of the internal options that are available. So we need to make sure that we're training Australian workers and retraining them and training them for the future. If that still doesn't meet our labour needs, then we need to go to permanent migration, because that gives the migrants the protection of being a full member of the Australian society. They can't be deported, they can't be threatened with deportation. And it's only then after that point that we should start to look at things like temporary migration. And we then should only look at temporary migration in areas where they are really needed and in geographic areas where the labour's needed. At the moment, there are no controls placed on the geographic location of temporary skilled migrant workers. As long as the occupation is on the shortage list, even if the shortages are in Gladstone in Queensland, it doesn't stop an employer in Tasmania bringing a worker in under the scheme. So we need to better manage the temporary skilled migration program, but we need to first of all be committed to increasing the stock of skilled workers in Australia, and we do that by training, adequate investment in training, adequate investment in the TAFE system, adequate investment in industry planning, and we do it through permanent migration, which adds permanently to the skilled stock of the country.
I dare say that the easy answer to this is, it would cost so much money to do all of this that it's beyond us. Is it beyond us financially?
Well, I don't believe that it's beyond Australia to put in place proper programs that protect people who work here. Whether they're here permanently, whether they're born in Australia, whether they come through permanent migration programs, or if they are here under some properly funded and operated temporary migration program, of course we can afford to do it. Anyone coming here or anyone here working is contributing to the tax system. They're paying tax, they're contributing to government coffers, they're contributing to the community. So they're contributing at both a social and an economic level. So there are benefits that flow from that. There are wealth benefits that flow to the country, and that should be fed back into properly resourcing what we need for skilled labour in the future.
And as a human rights issue, it's actually addressing, rather than labour being a commodity, which is in fact the foundation for the whole international legal scheme for protection of workers' rights, is that labour is not a commodity, that we as labourers, we are human beings, and this is a human being issue. So it's actually a human rights issue. And that labour is not disposable. If you actually talk about workers being temporary migrants and we don't need them anymore, throw them away, that is so against what we see as a multicultural society where we value human contribution and human endeavour.
I think that Australian workers believe that everyone is entitled to be treated fairly. And I think that the campaign against the government's work choices legislation demonstrates that people genuinely believe that everyone else is entitled to be treated reasonably, entitled to be treated with dignity, entitled to basic rights. I think Australian workers believe that. I think that's what makes Australian workers the unique group of people that we are.
Well, that's it for the Union show tonight. Fascinating story, isn't it? Trading in people. And I tell you what else is fascinating. The number of people from all around the world who come to look at this 8-hour-a-day monument.
Son, I'm proud to be a Union son. I said, son, I'm proud to be a Union proud. To be a Union son. Son, I'm proud to be a Union son. Oh, yes, I am a Union son.